made self-portraiture possible. Having become a popular household object sometime after the 14th century, the mirror intrigued both painters and scholars. Men of science discovered in it paradoxes of symmetry and infinity. Painters discovered paradoxes of representation and reflected images. An Austrian painter, Johannes Gump, a contemporary of Rembrandt, unveiled the device. The painter is positioned in the axis of both the mirror and the canvas at the same time. In order to observe his own reflection, he must regularly turn his head and eyes, which is how Gump painted himself. Perhaps the dog and the cat that menace each other are there to remind us that the look elaborated by the painter little by little was the result of a long struggle, which helps explain the tension frequently seen in self-portraits. In turn, the canvas becomes the mirror, and the viewer has the impression that the painter's glance is fixed on him. Does the mirror render the portraits truly representative of their subjects? Rembrandt was drawn and painted by his students several times, so often, in fact, that for a long time their canvases were attributed to him. The face seen by others is very like the one that appears in his self-portraits. But they are not exactly alike because another paradox, the reflected image, is inverted. The left side, painted as it is in fact perceived by the viewer as the right side of a face that would be in front of the viewer. Faces are rarely symmetrical. The image of the self-portrait is deceptive. If the painter paints himself as he works, he must confront another consequence of this paradox. Among right-handed people, the palette and the maul stick are held in the left hand, and it's the right hand that holds the brush. The image in the mirror inverts this relationship. Thus, classical painters had to cheat in order to transform their left hand into their right hand. Radiography of a self-portrait in the National Gallery of London shows that Rembrandt first painted himself just as he saw himself. But he later preferred to delete his painter's tools rather than to appear left-handed. Later, painters would no longer worry about camouflage. David, then Monet, Van Gogh, and Cézanne painted themselves as they saw themselves. Their left hand became a right hand holding the palette. Photographs prove that Cézanne was indeed right-handed. In his self-portrait, Caillebotte shows the decor the way it was reflected in a mirror. Thus, he seemed to paint with his left hand. And the Moulin de la Galette by Renoir that he possessed is also seen in reverse. In Rembrandt's self-portraits, his face turned toward the viewer is lit from the left side. There are two exceptions to this, however: the self-portrait in Washington and the one in Cologne. This studio device of the painter working in front of a subject lit from the left is more frequent. The right-handed painter can apply his brush strokes while always having the light on the good side of the brush. Thus, he always sees what he's doing without being bothered by the shadow cast by his hand. And because his model is lit by the same source of light, there is a direct relationship between the modulations of the image and the gestures of the painter. In engraving, the principle is the same. The density of the lines etched on a copper plate indicates shading, but the printing of the proof on paper shows the design inverted. Thus, most of Rembrandt's engraved self-portraits show light that seems to come from the right. The size of the pictures varies considerably, from 15 centimeters high for the portrait in Munich to 1 meter 35 centimeters for the one in the Frick collection. Some have been cut down by collectors. On one of the two oval portraits in the Louvre, splinters can be seen on the edge of the wood and the brush strokes stop suddenly. On the other hand, The other portrait shows its original beveling. Chiaroscuro imposed a rather constant compositional technique on Rembrandt. He used a uniform preparation of half brightness and a rosy tint that remained obvious in places. He undoubtedly began by drawing a light sketch in a halftone. And he constructed his painting by distributing dark colors in thin layers and then light colors in thicker layers. He finished with the lightest sections or with reflections that, in general, were the heaviest areas. Beginning with the first self-portraits in 1629, the stroke is visible. The ringlets of the hair are suggested by little spirals made with the help of the brush handle in the still wet paint. The underlying preparation is thus uncovered and gives the hair its orange highlight. This quickness of execution, this apparent unfinished quality, must have shocked many of Rembrandt's contemporaries. A large part of the face remains in shadow, which ran contrary to the rules of portrait painting then in vogue. The viewer is confronted with an incomplete image in contrast that must be completed in his or her imagination. Rembrandt's self-portrait in the toque and the gold chain in the Louvre, painted on an oval wood panel, dates from 4 years later. The image was composed on a reddish-brown preparation that is visible in the hair. Even the grain of the wood is perceptible. On this preparation, a lightly translucent coat of gray is used to make the background. The face, much more compact, was painted using tight little brush strokes, pink on the cheeks, yellow around the eyes and on the nose, gray at the bottom of the face, green near the ears, carmine and black for the lips. The tips of the mustache were etched with the brush handle in the still fresh base. On the left, the hair is outlined. Little curved strokes show a rather fluid black pigment on a lighter reddish background. On the right, in the shadow, the same black is used, but more densely. The gold chain was chiseled with the help of arabesques in ochre, its luminance created with dabs of yellow and the reflected light with white. In the self-portrait in the Frick collection, dated from 1658, the brush strokes were changed to produce different textures: the cords of the red belt, the folds of the white sleeve, the fur of the cape, the frills of the yellow shirt, the black and gold highlights of the brocade, the brilliance of the silver cane. Once again, much finer brushstrokes sculpt the face and suggest wrinkles, swellings, acne, patches of pale light. The fashion in Holland at the time was the meticulous rendering of material and skin tones. However, in contrast, Rembrandt's technique was relatively crude and undefined. Thick paint, smeared on, rubbed in, scratched through. He was interested in even the makeup of the pigments he used to create an elusive texture. The resemblance was no longer achieved at the